So now we've got the rod, we've broken it back down into two pieces so it's easier to work with, and we have little tick marks where each of these guides go. You know, since I'm doing this on camera, I'll start with the largest guides and work towards the tip and kind of show you how I do it. Right now what I'm doing is I'm dressing up the feet of this largest stripper guide, which is the first one we'll be putting on. And what I'm doing is I'm just using one of my finest files. I'm taking the guide foot, I'm putting it against the file, and I'm eyeballing it. I'm making sure that it's, you know, contacting the entire file. In other words, those feet are straight. They're not like a Christmas tree, and they're not, you know, convex or whatever. So I'm also sharpening the feet. Essentially, I'm making little, almost knife edges out of each of these feet, round knife edges. Because remember, these guides are going to get placed on the rod, and then we have to start on the rod blank, wrapping thread, moving towards the center of this guide here, and we want that thread to slowly work its way up that foot. So we need to create a ramp. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So I'm really just sharpening these so that, you know, they taper down to the rod blank, and the metal is really thin. We have a nice thin edge where it actually meets the blank, so we're creating a ramp for that thread. Let me show you on the whiteboard. This is a rather poor representation of a stripper guide. So what I'm talking about when I say that we need to dress with a file these stripping guides, what I'm concerned about is that the bottom of the guide be completely flat. So I'm substituting a file down here for the rod blank and making sure that I have even contact with the rod blank, and I'm creating a ramp. Now this is a little too steep over here. Remember, you've got a wrapped thread around here, and you don't want the thread to have to jump to get up on this guide foot, because then, you know, you end up with gaps and it doesn't look very clean. This is a much more gradual angle. It's more knife edge where it hits the rod blank. So that's what I'm doing by dressing these guides. I'm creating a nice smooth wrap for the thread to travel on as we are rotating this and wrapping thread all the way around it. So once you've dressed up your guides with a file, they're nice and straight, and you've created a nice taper at the ends for the thread to travel up, it's time to go ahead and start putting them on the rod. But we want to do this temporarily. Now, my preference is to use masking tape because you can even wiggle it around back and forth. Don't drive yourself crazy trying to make sure that they're straight from the start. When you're dealing with something as long and as fine as a fly rod, variances in guide straightness are very apparent, and the beginning rod builder typically just drives himself completely straight, you know, crazy, trying to get straight guides before he even starts wrapping. That's a waste of time. Don't fall for that trap. Just go ahead and do the best you can by standing above the rod. You know, locate your marks. You know where the marks are. But most importantly, make sure that the marks that you've made for the belly of the rod, directly opposite the spine, are directly up. Then take your guide, and all of these marks represent the center of that guide. So I have a little tick mark right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look down, straight down at that rod, and I'm going to put the guide right on that mark. Right on that mark. And once I've done that, I'm going to kind of just hold it there and look at it, take another look at it, make sure that the mark for the belly of the rod is straight up. And now I compare and make sure that the rod guide is straight up. And also I take a look at the amount of rod blank material on either side of the foot to try to, you know, make sure that I am on the center line of the rod. Once I've done that, I'm just going to take a little bit of 1/4 inch masking tape here, and I'm just going to pull off a little bit. And then I'm going to tape it. I'm just going to tape it in place. Okay. Alright, so putting it on the mark, straight up and down as opposed to the belly mark of the rod. And I'm going to take some tape, I'm going to put it right on here, as close to the guide itself as possible. I want to leave the foot exposed, the tapered part of the foot, because I'm not going to remove this tape until I've already started wrapping thread, and I've got that thread all the way up to the tape, and the thread is now holding in place. Now I can then just peel off that tape. So just to hold this firm, I'm going to go ahead and mark, just tape both feet down. Again, leaving the tip of the foot exposed so that I've got something to start wrapping thread on. Alright, so that's nice and tight. And this is now temporarily in place. And I can move on and start putting the rest of the guides in place on each of my little tick marks. Okay, so I'm all the way out at the tip now, and I've got my absolute straightest of my smallest snake guides. I reserved it for the very, very tip position here. I've already dressed it. I've created a nice taper, a nice blade edge for the thread to run up on, and it's nice and straight. So I'm going to go ahead and just locate this on the rod with some tape. You know, doing a snake guide is, you know, no different than doing the stripper guide that I showed you earlier. I use 2 pieces of tape to hold it securely in place. I make sure that the belly marks of the rod are straight up, and then I set it down in place. And then I tape it in place. Now again, don't drive yourself nuts trying to make these things totally straight before you even start wrapping the rod. Once the thread is on there, you'll be able to tweak these guides back and forth to achieve your final straightness right before you begin putting epoxy on there. So here's my smallest of all the snake guides, and it's in place. I'm putting this tape really close to the guide itself. I'm leaving the very tip of that foot exposed so that I've got something to start wrapping thread around. There we go. So once you have all of them on, it's time to start talking about wrapping the thread.